What can we learn about the diving behavior of a Weddell seal? As we said before, every scientific research project begins with questions. This project is looking for the timing of female Weddell seals' big events, pupping and molting, and how their health or condition of the animals affects if and or when a seal gives birth next year. There are many factors that come into play when trying to answer these questions. An important factor is the animal's ability to forage or hunt for food. The Weddell seal does this by diving. But before we can figure out how a seal uses their energy, we need to take a look at how they get their energy from eating, and seals get their food by diving. The previous lesson showed us what a Weddell seal eats, and this lesson will dive into how a seal gets its food. We'll look at the data gathered by the research team and see what conclusions we can make. How do the researchers gather information about seal diving? The data we're using in this lesson comes from a time depth recorder, or TDR, which is attached to the middle of the hind flipper of each study seal. The team attached time depth recorders to 24 female seals in November and December of 2014 and recovered them an average of 60 days later in January and February of 2015. The recorders are programmed to collect the seal's depth every 6 seconds. Let's take a look at what the records show us. This is a full dive record of a typical female seal over a 2-month period of time. The red circle marks the part of the dive record that we'll examine more closely. This circle marks a bout, which is a group of dives that happen one after another until the seal needs to rest. First, let's take a look at how researchers define a seal dive. This is a graph showing a single Weddell seal dive, and there's a lot we can learn from looking at this picture. Let's take a closer look. There are 4 main parts to a dive: the dive start, the bottom phase start, bottom phase end. The dive end. Label these dive parts. Let's dive a little deeper. What is the approximate depth at each of these points? How deep is the seal at the deepest point of its dive? Can you tell how long the seal was underwater? What do you think is happening at the bottom phase of the dive, where it's labeled wiggles? Do all seal dives look alike? This graph shows 4 typical seal dive profiles, or shapes of a dive. A square-shaped dive shows equal time spent on the descent, going down, and ascent, going up, as well as extra time at the bottom phase. V-shaped dives show equal time spent on the descent and ascent with no time at the bottom. Skewed right dives show more time spent on ascent than descent and no or little time at the bottom. Skewed left dives show more time spent on descent than ascent and no or little time at the bottom. Try it for yourself. What dive profiles or shapes most closely match this dive? Let's zoom out and take a closer look at several dives. The research team defines a single dive as one that is over 10 meters deep, lasts at least 30 seconds, and is followed by a period of rest. Let's try it. Using the definition of above, circle the number of individual dives within this timeline. How many dives did you count? It's not as easy as it looks. Here's what the team came up with. They counted 22 individual dives. Was your count close? Was it difficult to count where the individual dives started and stopped? Let's take a look at dive depths. Use this chart to count the number of dives at each depth category. Shallow dives are anything less than 100 meters. Mid-level dives are anything between 100 and 300 meters. Deep dives are anything over 300 meters. Use the maximum depth during an individual dive for your count. What did you come up with? Did you come up with similar answers? Some of these dives are tricky to count. The researchers are not necessarily looking for the exact number. They are looking for trends. Some of their questions might be, is there a tendency for a seal to dive at certain depths? Or are there patterns in their diving behavior? You will see the dive records from all 24 seals over an average period of 60 days between mid-November and early February of 2014. What trends or patterns can you find in these individual dive records? Are there any similarities among the records? Do any of the records stand out to you as being very different from the others? Nine dive records are circled in red because the research team believes those records have a similar shape. Can you identify the pattern they see? The research team noticed that these records circled in red all appear to have an upside-down U shape to them. At the beginning of each circled dive record, those seals were making deep dives. Their dives gradually became more and more shallow, and after some time, the dives started increasing in depth. Can you think of any reason why this might happen? Try to make a hypothesis. Here's a bit more information to help you with your hypothesis. Around December 15th, phytoplankton, which are microscopic sea organisms, begin to bloom in the Ross Sea. The period in which the seals are diving to shallower depths occurs around the first 2 weeks of January. Do you notice these patterns? Do you see any more? What are your explanations? And would you like to do this type of work someday? Scientific research takes us from one question to another. The research team is working on answering these questions, and hopefully you are too. The next question, or your next question, could lead to a great discovery.